Good evening. It's Monday, February 24th, 2020, and this is a Plano City Council recap. Now, we got to welcome home new Chief of Police, Ed Drain, tonight. I'll get to that in a little more detail. And the new council, had our first 4-4 vote in 8 months, but it didn't go how you would have thought. So I'll get to that too. It's a little teaser. So we started out the evening with executive session. We did a bunch of stuff. I can't tell you about it because it was an executive session. Then we moved on to our preliminary open meeting. This actually got bifurcated in two because we had to start our regular meeting and we still had preliminary open meeting business to attend to, but I'm going to cover it all at once. So first, the prior chair of the Senior Advisory Board, Sonia Baumgarten, had to unfortunately resign unexpectedly. And we appointed Vice Chair Todd Felker to chair the committee in her place, or the board, I'm sorry, in her place. And we appointed Mary Jacobs in the interim seat, vacated by Sonia. Then we moved into a presentation about the citizen survey results. I took a lot of notes here. I'm going to go fast, but I think these are interesting. 590 surveys were completed, took about 15 minutes on average per survey, with 2,500 citizens targeted. They were targeted at random across the city. 95% reported that they are satisfied with city services. This is 47% higher than the national average. So well done, Plano staff. 92% reported that they were satisfied with the quality of life in Plano, which rated well above the national average also. 11% said that they were dissatisfied with the value they received for their taxes, which means that 89% were not dissatisfied with value. And as everybody who's followed me for any length of time knows, that I'm about driving value for the tax dollars, not just lower tax dollars. The more we can get, literally, the bigger bang for our buck, the better. 14% were dissatisfied with property standards enforcement, and 26% were dissatisfied with the maintenance of streets and sidewalks. And that level of dissatisfaction has been rising year over year for the past couple of years. So you've heard me speak a little bit about the bond election we're going to have next year. It is anticipated that we will have $350 million on the bond referendum. I am willing to bet you that infrastructure, streets, and sidewalks takes top of the ticket. There was much greater satisfaction across the board for pretty much everything than the Texas and U.S. averages, except for traffic signals and road congestion. It's something we're all feeling. We hear you. And obviously the maintenance of our streets and sidewalks is going to be our #1 priority. 76% of respondents said they would rather keep their current tax level. This was framed as tax rate, but I'll get into that later in a later video. They would rather keep their tax rate and not cut services, versus 20% who said they would rather lower their taxes and cut services. So that's worth exploring all on its own another time. Then we had the report presentation on the annual chlorine burn, the chlorine water maintenance that is going to occur March 2nd to March 30th. It's coming right up. So what this is for this period of time, about a month every year, they do not change the chlorine level in the water. The amount of chlorine stays the same. But ordinarily, 11 months out of the year, they mix chlorine and ammonia, which creates chloramines, which is the disinfectant that is secondary to the ozonation that occurs at the water plant. We have the largest ozonating plant in the country, but the chloramines, which disinfect the water as a secondary stage of infection, for a month out of the year, in March basically, we remove the ammonia from the equation, so it is just chlorine. The chlorine level itself stays the same, but because it is not reacting with the ammonia, then that creates the much more noticeable chlorine taste, feel, etc., that you're going to notice for a month. Now, we are working toward eliminating that distinct noticeability in every month, in 1 month out of every year. And the North Texas Municipal Water District is actively working to implement biologically active filtration, biofiltration, and They are bringing one plant online this year, and they've engaged a firm to help them plan the timeline for the rest of it. So biologically active filtration, it's kind of like probiotics for your water supply. It actively works to keep up the water health without the need to take on such a noticeable measure every spring. It is done in the spring because it cleans out just the pure chlorine, dramatically minimizes the amount of biological activity in the water, negative, harmful biological activity, to a minimum amount. And that's done at this time of year in March, in the spring, in advance of the summer, because when it starts heating up, then all those bioorganisms are going to run amok in our water supply, which is something we don't really want. So currently they do this process with the chlorine burn in order to get rid of as much as possible of the biological organisms in the water in advance of summer. But with the biofiltration that is being implemented, then this should become a thing of the past. We'll have to wait and see how far in the past, depending on the timeline, to roll this out across the entire North Texas Municipal Water District. So a couple of tips for those with sensitivities to chlorine. It's advised to refrigerate water overnight. Also, you can add citrus to water, whether that's bath water or drinking water. You can look on the North Texas Municipal Water District's website. I believe that's ntmwd.org for a complete list of proactive measures that you can take, as well as some reactive measures. Now, that's where we broke. We came back later and heard the Media Relations Departmental report. And we also heard from HR and Risk Management, the departmental report, and we reviewed how numerous employees try to contribute toward making Plano a better place, as we saw the results reflected in the citizen survey previously. And we learned that the turnover rate among city staff is 6.79%, not including retirement. That is a tremendously low number, so a lot of people who work for the city of Plano want to stay with the city of Plano, and many do until retirement, which, by the way, that only bumps up to 7.5%, including retirement. Then we had a presentation on short-term rentals. In 2018, it was estimated that there were 23,000 short-term rental companies operating. That's an astounding number for something which has gained steam only in recent history. Now, the Texas Supreme Court, there are a lot of publicized issues associated with short-term rentals. However, the Texas Supreme Court has rejected arguments that short-term rentals are considered commercial, and they treat them as residential, and therefore there are very limited options as to what can be done in the state of Texas to regulate or curtail short-term rentals. However, in reality, short-term rentals themselves aren't the problem. It's on occasion people who are using short-term rentals as a mechanism to create public nuisance. However, we already have public nuisance ordinances and statutes on the books. All we need to do is enforce them. So we are discussing ways in which we can make sure that the existing ordinances are enforced and laws are enforced. So because the overwhelming majority of people who utilize short-term rentals, they do so to the point where nobody notices. There are a few problem properties that are repeat offenders, if you will, and we're looking at what separates those in terms of their rental practices from the ones that have no problems. Then we opened the regular meeting. Proclamation was delivered to celebrate the centennial anniversary for the League of Women Voters, so congratulations. And then the highlight of the evening was that we got to welcome home our new chief of police, Ed Drain. Now, Ed spent his entire career in Plano on the police force until we loaned him out to Amarillo a few years ago, and they liked him so much they wanted to keep him. So Chief Drain spent the last 3 years as chief of the Amarillo PD, and as through a series of events that left us with a vacancy in the city of Plano as our police chief after Chief Greg Rushin retired from chief of police and was promoted to deputy city manager, we welcomed Chief Drain back home today. He took his official oath of office, and we are so thrilled to have him back here. Now, one of the things that was mentioned at his reception today is that we looked at a lot of applicants across the country, a lot of people, and all signs kept pointing to Chief Drain. He was the best fit, and we are so thrilled to have you back, Chief Drain. We did pull item D from the consent agenda. This was an expenditure for new furniture for Parr Library. Now, the reason that I asked this to be pulled was because the description in the consent agenda was that the furniture had deteriorated beyond its useful life. Now, after additional explanation, what's happening with this expenditure is that for a long time, the city had a policy of replacing furniture a little bit at a time, like 10% a year, something like that. And over the course of a decade, you'd have a lot of mismatched furniture, maybe some furniture that wasn't quite up to date. And so a few years ago, the city staff undertook a policy to replace furniture wholesale, like a 12-year lifespan, and then replace everything so that you've got technologically current furniture and that it matches and provides a better experience at whichever library you're visiting. This has been done with a couple of libraries already. It's Parr's turn, and we'll be doing it with additional libraries in the coming years. But the idea is to renovate at least replace the furniture in a library all at once, which I did support. That passed. All the consent agenda items passed. It is worth noting that $2 million worth of expenditures went through tonight's consent agenda. They were passed because the money had to be spent, but that was a large ticket all at once. And you can find the breakdown of most of those expenditures on my City Council preview post from earlier today, or of course in the archives on the city website. Please Google Plano Council agendas and look for today's agenda. Now, the first item on the items for individual consideration was actually tabled. That was the new consideration for the JCPenney land redevelopment. So that got tabled. It is expected to come up again on March 17th. Then we moved into what turned out to be the longest meeting, or longest discussion of the night, an appeal for the denial of heritage tax exemptions. Now, in our heritage district in and around downtown Plano, there is a requirement that property owners maintain their historical properties. There is also a voluntary tax credit program so that depending on how you're applying, you can get a credit on your property taxes, which you put toward maintaining the property, because we want to maintain the character and the value of our historical district. Now, there were two properties that were appealing their denial. There were others that had been denied for one reason or another. There were two that were appealing their denial. One on 15th Street, based on, they had been part of this program previously. There were some repairs that were not affected in time. And then there was a property on 18th Street, which is a new applicant, and the application was submitted in December, the inspection made in January, on January 8th, and the property owner was then notified that they did not meet the criteria because of 3 items that did not have certificates of acceptance, or acceptability, I should say. But this all turned out too quickly, this all unfolded too quickly for the property owner to make things right. Now, he will be able to apply again next year after making the changes, but with both of these, a big opportunity for communication, improved communication, was revealed tonight in all of our discussions. We easily spent half an hour on just this topic, just this item. In the end, we voted to let the applicant on 18th Street, not give them an exemption, let them work through these issues and apply again next year. But on the applicant on 15th Street, we got mired in a discussion about the ratings that determine whether or not a property is ineligible. And this is what resulted in the 4-4 split. and it is not the way anybody thought we would have gone. On the approved side was myself, Mayor Pro Tem Rick Smith, Councilwoman Casey Prince, and Councilwoman Maria Tu. We wanted to grant the appeal so that this property owner could receive the tax credit. On the voting against that motion to approve the appeal was Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Anthony Riccardelli, Councilwoman Lily Bow, Mayor Harry LaRoseliere, and Councilman Rick Grady. Now, it is worth noting that in 8 months of this new council, this is the first 4-4 split we've had. And the lines, like I said, were not where anybody would have thought they went. So this brings up another opportunity because we were split, and it was because basically split along definitional lines. We have an opportunity to do much better when we define our ordinances, when council passes these ordinances. We got to make sure that things are clear. We can't foresee all circumstances, but we've really got to turn these over and try our best to foresee where we might have issues. The primary issue in this was how do you define element? These properties are scored or inspected, I should say, based on elements. And the definition for the condition of these elements is if more than 25% is in a certain state of repair, then it is considered in poor condition. But we never defined element in the ordinance. So you could consider an element as a particular board or a feature. So we've got to do better, not just for defining what an element is, but defining all sorts of things when we pass ordinances, because it does matter. And for you watching this video, or for us up on the dais, it's an issue of a single evening or the length of a video. But for the property owners, it's a very big deal and could mean thousands of dollars. So we've got to make sure we're clear so that we're setting a level playing field for everybody. And I'm going to do my part to make sure we do that. Tune in next time for the next council meeting, and for everything else in between. I'm Shelby Williams for Plano City Council. Thank you and good night.